You're the one that brought it in.
Terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. Often, the term is used to refer to protests, even peaceful ones. However, the difference between an inconvenient or annoying protest and an act of terrorism lies in the intended purpose and the result. The protesters throwing soup or paint on protected paintings to raise awareness for the environment and climate change may be rather frustrating if you were hoping to see the Mona Lisa, but the act itself does not harm viewers. It does not offer a risk of health detriments or physical danger. In contrast, trans rights activists, particularly pissed off trannies, has participated in so-called protests that should rightfully be called acts of terrorism against those who criticize gender ideology in an attempt to silence opponents.
It is piss, yeah. It's like a protest, dirty protest. If he gets me, I'm fucking knocking him out.
Thus fulfilling both the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, as well as being in the pursuit of political aims. In September of 2022, members of pissed off trannies left jugs of urine on the Equality and Human Rights Commission's doorstep, where one activist pissed himself and poured urine on himself. On December 15, 2022, trans activists stormed a child safeguarding event in Brussels, where child psychiatrist Caroline Ilichev and Professor Sulon Masson held a talk at Café La Quique to discuss their recent publication, The Transgender Child Factory, and threw pots of garbage and cow dung at attendees. These protesters were primarily male, and all but one evaded arrest. On May 22, 2023, members of Pissed Off Trannies arrived at the Equality and Human Rights Commission to protest against alterations to the Equality Act, which would strengthen women's sex-based rights by leaving 90 liters of human urine around the building. Not only is this disgusting, but it is a health hazard that puts the safety of workers and the public at risk. Additionally, while public urination is typically considered a crime, these protests have resulted in a few arrests and little attention from the media, except for an exclusive from Vice who withheld the identity of a protester due to past links, and coverage from Redux. Instead, we have yet another illustration of what should be considered a crime, if not a sex crime, going ignored because of the identity of those who participated in it.
Security.
What is worth more, art or life? Is it worth more than food? Worth more than justice? Are you more concerned about the protection of a painting or the protection of our planet and people? The cost of living crisis is part of the cost of oil crisis. Fuel is unaffordable to millions of cold, hungry families. They can't even afford to heat a tin of soup.
Interestingly, the Just Stop Oil protesters who threw soup at Van Gogh sunflowers were sentenced to 2 years in prison in late September of 2024, as the judge noted, in an effort to deter other protesters. This sentencing is far more strict than previous climate activists have received, all of whom chose actions that would be visible, but which would avoid permanently damaging artwork or harming bystanders. as noted in a New York Times article on the topic. A protester who glued himself to the frame of another Van Gogh work, Peach Trees in Blossom, at the Courtauld Gallery in London, was sentenced to a 3-week prison term in 2022. But most activists have avoided jail time. 5 Just Stop Oil members who stuck themselves to the frame around a copy of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper and spray-painted the phrase "No New Oil" on the wall at the Royal Academy were each fined about £486, about $650. During Plumere and Holland's sentencing hearing, Judge Hehir said that the acidic soup had a corrosive effect on the painting's 17th century wood frame, and had lowered the frame's value by an estimated £10,000, or about $13,000. The judge said the duo's action came close to damaging the masterpiece itself, within the thickness of a pane of glass. He added that stupidity like this could lead museums to withdraw cultural treasures from public view, or force them to introduce onerous security measures that would deter visitors. Additionally, all those involved were adults, if young adults, and were able to recognize the consequences of their actions, even if extensive jail time was not expected. More recently, a group known as Trans Kids Deserve Better, or TKDB, has become active and vocal about their disapproval of their political opponents, and has relied on the volunteer efforts of minors to avoid repercussions. Not only are minors' identities typically protected in the news coverage, but they will likely not receive jail sentencing, will be reported on with less detail, and in the case of the terrorist act at the LGBT Alliance's recent conference, weren't even arrested. As reported on Spiked Online, the activists felt moved to action to stop LGBT Alliance's hate and cruelty. They did so by releasing thousands of insects, including cockroaches, mealworms, and crickets upon conference goers, resulting in an evacuation of the venue until the insects could be removed. Many so-called allies cheer online about this act. They are fundraising for legal fees and to support the organization. No one stops to ask, in what is supposed to be a democratic nation, is it moral to terrorize those who don't agree with you? In addition, the use of minors to carry out such acts is being paraded as an act of bravery, a la the perpetual support of trans kids, rather than being denounced as the coercive and manipulative practice that it actually is.
So I'm going to come on and talk about something that is probably one of the most controversial opinions I've given on this app as of yet, but it's an opinion that quite a few people hold, but nobody's talking about. Now, for me personally, I feel like I am going to have to step away from the transgender community and the transgender rights movement and the activism. My reasons for this is over the last 10 years, activism has changed. It seems like everybody wants to call themselves an activist, to jump on it for a bit of clout or publicity, or just to make themselves a little bit juju different. 10 years ago when I started activism way before social media, it wasn't like this and we weren't pulling madness of stunts. Now it's gone downhill since COVID. There's been a split divide that cracks have started to show, and due to the last incident where a bunch of transgender children, where a group is run and managed by a non-binary trans man that is prevalent in the press, they released a load of crickets into the LGB Association meeting. Now, I don't like the LGB Association. There's not a lot of trans people that do. But using live animals, which using the excuse of, oh, well, they're given to lizards or whatever to give them food and they're getting unalived anyway. No, that's the cycle of life. Putting animals and using them like that is giving Just Stop Oil vibes, and everybody hated Just Stop Oil. Now, not only this, what change does it get us? It just shows us that we're a nuisance. Now, JK came out with a tweet, and it is a rarity that I will ever agree with anything that JK Rowling says, but she hit the nail on the head with the first part of her tweet. And JK says, did any of those releasing insects at the LGB Alliance meeting have a split second of sanity in which they thought, am I in fact proving every critic of gender identity ideology right? And you know what? She is right. And I never thought I'd agree with that part of her tweet. Because doing things like this prove that what they're saying about us is true. Now, unfortunately, this is a minority of the community, but there are people behind it that are pushing this forward, outlets, that then people will see the whole community as people like that. Majority of us just want to go about our days and continue our lives and not get our rights taken away from us. But people like that have now caused a massive split between the community, where the community is divided. Push this agenda that things like this are okay. They're not. We don't implement change by creating criminal acts and showing that we're a bunch of criminals that ain't got a brain up there. If you want to implement change and be a true activist, stop doing it for clout. Stop using transgender children as your pawn in your games. At the end of the day, the way I see it with transgender children, yes, you do get trans kids, but just let kids be kids. If they want to come out as trans, they're going to come out as trans. There's no need to, you know, be like, leave our kids alone, we're keeping the kids to ourselves. Because that's why they've got the views like that, is because of the type of language we're using. That might not necessarily be the case, but it's the way that you're portraying it. And then everybody thinks the community's like that. So do better.
The division between the selfish and homophobic supporters who propagate narratives such as same-sex attraction is homophobic, or trans people are at risk of being victimized by the whole world, and those who are simply uneducated on the topic, does not matter when the result is the same. What is a homophobic act of terrorism is being celebrated by far more than those who condemn it. And what does that say about the trans rights movement itself? That it is intolerant, homophobic, and powerful enough to evade consequences, which is the exact opposite of what it claims to be.
What are you doing? What are you doing? You realize you're assaulting this.
He started assaulting people first, sir. He elbowed my friend. So I'm not
You just ran out of nowhere.
This, dear viewers, is where we part. I did not mention in the script the assault of Fred Sargent, who I did an interview with a couple years ago after he was assaulted at Pride. But I find it very important to note that this is a pattern of behavior, and it's consistently being portrayed as just protesting, as freedom of speech. And here's the thing, it's not. When a woman is not allowed to call a man lest she be sentenced to jail time or arrested, but trans rights terrorists are allowed to unleash insects at a conference, it's very obvious there's a double standard at play here. And quite frankly, I'm annoyed that we have to have this conversation again and again and again. This isn't protesting, this isn't free speech, this is terrorism. They want to shut up those who disagree with them by any means necessary. And of course, they're willing to stoop to using children to propagate this goal because, well, you can't really report on children, can you? And most likely these children will not be sentenced to jail time if they're prosecuted for anything at all. And to be quite honest, I'm sure that the media won't even update us on this, or if they do, it'll be in a unfortunately positive light regarding the students themselves. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can let me know in the comment section down below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!